it just a few minutes, make sure I can see where everyone will engage if they want to. I am thrilled to be joining y'all today and am very, very excited to get started on our topic today. So like I said, just a couple of seconds and then we will go ahead and go. Right. Awesome. Thank you guys for bearing with me to make sure everything is working on my end. If for some reason the sound sounds strange or you lose something, please let me know in one of the comments so I can fix it, because I want you guys to hear all of this information. I am thrilled, like I say always, to be here today. If you have not tuned in with me before, I'm Alice. I am the Director of Pre-Law Programming for Montgomery Admissions Consulting, where we specialize in first-generation law school application support and minority law school application support. So if you are struggling and have no idea how to start this process, we can help. Hopefully this video will be helpful. Although, given what we're covering today, if you are still in the midst of the application process or are getting ready to start the application process, this may not be super helpful yet. It could come in handy later on down the road though. So, like I said, probably not super helpful for those of you that are in the application process for your first year of law school right now, because today we're talking all about transferring law schools. Whether or not you should transfer, whether it might be a good idea, what all goes into that process, why it is a rather big decision for you to make as you are in the midst of your law school journey, and when it could be a really good option. So before we get started, like always, if you have seen any video that I do, if you've tuned in with me before, I want to make sure that I am very, very clear. This is general information. Particularly with transfer applications, there's going to be a lot of little nuances for each school. So make sure, you can start with what I'm going to tell you here. Make sure that you are double checking everything with the school that you are planning to transfer if this is you. Okay? Beautiful. Like I said at the top, if you have any questions, if you can't hear me, if something is going wonky on my end, let me know in the comments. I will try to fix on the fly and we'll make sure we get all of this good to go. And if you do have questions, I want to make sure that I'm addressing those if I don't get to them in the video or while I'm here. Please ignore the helicopter that apparently has decided to live on top of my home. That's cool. Okay, so love live. Love that we're here for this. Really, really quickly, one basic fact on transferring. The typical time for transfer is going to be between your first and your second year of law school. So you will finish up your first year at the school where you matriculated initially, and if you are unhappy there or you're planning to leave for whatever reason, you would be transferring between your first year, you'd be starting your second year at that new school. It is very, 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 very rare, if it happens at all, that you would be transferring sometime during your second year or anytime after your second year. A lot of the reason for this is that there are credit requirements. Ooh, that's hard to say. Credit requirements for each school to be able to give you a degree, basically. For a student that joins the school just for their last year, you've done 2/3 of your legal education somewhere else. It feels very weird for another academic institution to be the one that issues your degree. So, again, not impossible, I don't think, but very, 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 very rare. This is really just for those of you that are going into your 2L year, you are finishing up your first year right now, and you're thinking maybe I want to be somewhere I am not currently. Cool? Great. So, the first thing that I want to go over is just the process. It is not completely strange. You've just applied to law school. A lot of the pieces are going to look really familiar. First thing that's up, you're going to be going right back to LSAC. I know. How excited are you to be back in that application portal? This time, and you may have noticed this when you were applying during your first year, as you clicked on each school's application piece, they sometimes had a couple of different applications that you could choose from, whether that was a spring start, a fall first year application, a summer visiting application. Somewhere in that list, there's probably going to be a transfer application. You're going to click on that. You're going to do everything pretty much exactly the same way as you did when you applied in your first year. However, there are some different components and there are some specifics that come into play when you are transferring that we did not think about, did not have to think about, did not worry about during the first year application process. First one of those, everything that you should have done in your first year application should have gone through that LSAC platform. You sent your letters of rec through that. You sent your transcripts through that. You sent your application off through that. Everything was uploaded into that portal and they took care of it. That is not always the case. Your major application pieces will likely still live at LSAC's application portal, but oftentimes schools will ask for specific pieces of the application to be sent directly to them, whether that is your law school transcript. LSAC doesn't need to do any of the grade normalizing or anything along those lines that they do with the undergraduate transcripts when you are applying first year. So you can just send that transcript straight from your law school to the new one. Second thing is that sometimes they will need letters of good standing or class rank or something along those lines. I'll touch on that in a minute too. Those can usually be sent directly from your law school currently to your new law school. So keep an eye on which pieces need to come through LSAC and which pieces need to go from your hands to your new law school or from your law school to the new one. Good? All right. I mentioned class rank and GPA. Some law schools will put your class rank, so, 1 out of 300, 14 out of 140, whatever, wherever you live in that list of all of the students in the school. Make sure that you can find that. Some places make it public, although I think that is becoming less common. I know back when I was in law school, at least the top half of the class was posted just on the wall in a bulletin board. Hooray. They didn't have the GPAs outside of it, but you at least knew how you were doing relative to the other students in the top half of the class. If you were in the bottom half of the class, you didn't make it on the list, but that could be provided to you. You could figure out where you were. You could be told where you were in the grand scheme of the whole class if you asked for it. Some schools, it just goes straight on the transcript. You don't have to ask. It just lives there always. Somebody should be able to tell you that. You should be able to see it. If you are not sure, ask. If you go to a school that says they do not rank you in your first year, cool. That's very nice. It's just one more metric to add some stress in that first year. We love those. If your school does not rank in that way, they still know where you fall in the class and can generate a class rank for this purpose. Nearly every transfer application is going to ask for your GPA in addition to your class rank. You do want both of those. If you're not sure where you go to find it, start with someone in student services. Typically, you're going to have a registrar, you're going to have a dean of academics. They get called a couple of different things, but basically there is somebody in an administrative capacity. They may also be a faculty member. They're going to live somewhere in the school somewhere. And they're going to be the person that you talk to about grade appeals, about overload, about anything related to the academic piece of being in law school. They are the person that is the sort of final decision maker. Find them. They will be able to help you. If they are not the person that magically makes the thing appear, they know who does, and they can point you in the direction of that person. The next piece of the law school transfer application that is very different from your first year application is you are going to have a professor letter of recommendation. And not just any professor. You need one of your law school professors to write you a letter of recommendation. We've said this for the first years. You want to make sure you're asking for a good letter of recommendation, a strong letter of recommendation, a positive letter of recommendation from your law school professor. If you are hearing my voice and you are getting ready to start law school in the fall and you are a little unsure of the decision that you have made and you think this may apply to you sometime down the road, make sure that you are making good relationships with those faculty members, even if you aren't going to stay with them all 3 years. Make sure you are engaging in class. Make sure you are giving them nice things to say about you. Because I know I've talked about it before, professors often sit on admissions committees and they really, really love to hear what other professors say about you as a student. They are going to have you in an academic capacity. They want to know what you're going to do in their classroom. The easiest way to find that out is to talk to someone else whose classroom you have been in. If you have been sitting in the back, baseball cap on, slouched down, we're not making eye contact, we're not talking to anybody, we're not answering questions, we're maybe doing our reading. If you are that person, one, we should probably talk about your choice to go to law school. There may be a better place where you are happier. Two, you certainly are not going to get positive letters of recommendation. This is not optional. If you are transferring, you will have a letter of recommendation from a law school professor as part of your application, period. You don't get to wiggle into using the dean of students or an academic success person, or, as an admissions officer, I had a student that I worked with fairly closely throughout the application process ask me if I could write it. The answer is no. I would happily do it, but what I think doesn't matter. The part where my decision matters has passed. The part where my opinion is important is gone. You are transferring law school to law school. They want to know exactly what they are getting from someone whose class you have been in. I can say all the wonderful things in the world about how you were great to work with as an applicant, how you, even in your first semester, started volunteering to talk to other prospective students. That's great. And if that's something that you like to do, please do it. It makes admissions officers' jobs a lot easier. We like working with students. That's why we do what we do. But it's not going to help you at all in the transfer process. Do not try to sneak one in, because a faculty member also works in an administrative capacity and you have only dealt with them in their administrative capacity. Pick a professor. Ideally, pick a professor whose course is pretty standard across the curriculum. I know nearly every law school first-year curriculum is similar. There are some schools that add in little one-credit classes that are some kind of specialty piece of research or lawyering skills or some type of professionalism class that's a little less intense than the actual professional responsibility classes that sometimes come in your second year. If they are teaching in an unconventional way, they may not be your best bet. They are at least a faculty member and they are at least someone with a classroom that you have been in. But if you can pick someone from your contracts class, from your torts class, from your criminal law class, those are the professors that are going to be able to help you the most, assuming they will write something nice. So, relationships still important. Please pick a professor that has taught you something in a classroom in a typical law school fashion. Socratic method, cold calling, all of that fun stuff that you should know what is by now if you were thinking about transferring. The next piece of the transfer application is going to be a bit familiar. We are right back to that personal statement. We've talked about those a lot here, but there are some key differences in a first-year personal statement and a transfer application personal statement. Number one, do not assume you can just recycle your first year to your transfer for a couple of reasons. First one is that if you are transferring to a school to which you applied in the last cycle, regardless of whether you were admitted and you chose to go somewhere else, you were waitlisted and didn't get pulled up, you were denied outright, whatever the reason is, your application lives in that system. And we know as soon as your transfer app comes in that we also have a first year application for you. I will tell you with great certainty, every transfer application that ever came across my desk, if they had a first year application, I went and looked at both. The transfer application is what's important for the decision-making process, but I'm going to look at every piece of information that I have on you as an applicant, and that includes your first year application. If things have changed drastically, I'm not paying super close attention to your LSAT. I'm not looking super closely at your undergraduate grades at this point. I'm more interested in how you're doing in law school. But let me tell you what, if you send me the exact same personal statement and it has not changed at all, I'm going to deny you. I may be overruled because most of the time more than one person reads an application, But if you are not taking the time to write a new application essay as a transfer student, you have pretty much tanked your chances to get in as a transfer student. Do not do this thing. The second reason that you should not use your first year law school application essay is that a lot of the time transfer applications are a little bit more specific in their prompt. Most law schools want to know why you are choosing to do this. Transfer comes with a lot of consequences. Sounds very, very aggressive. That's not what I mean. There are consequences. There are things that happen because you have chosen to transfer, and not all of those things are positive. But there are specific things that come into play when you choose to transfer that make us want to know for certain you have a good reason for doing this. Just like I talk about when we're talking about personal statements and first year application essays, I want to know why you want to be here. It goes double for transfer applications. I want to know why you've chosen my school. What is bringing you from the place that you chose to start your first year to my school in the middle of it? Because transferring is, again, there are some consequences that come with it. Again, even if you are accepted, you're happy, and it's a good decision overall, there are some things you're going to have to contend with, and we'll talk about those at the end. But if you recycle your first year essay, chances are you're not talking about that. You may be talking about why you want to be an attorney, what's bringing you to that particular school. You may even have some of that, why are you coming to this school? The verbiage needs to change. Even if the reasons are similar, the verbiage needs to change from a first year personal statement to a transfer personal statement. You know a little bit more now about what legal education is about. You have picked up the terms, the knowledge that you get in your first year. I need to see that. I need to see that you are a transfer student. You are somebody that has a legal education, or at least part of one. And I need to understand why you are choosing to make it more difficult for a little bit in order to join my law school community and leave the community where you have started your legal education. The other thing is that sometimes transfer personal statements are smaller. You have even less space. So you need to be able to tell it to me very succinctly. You should learn in your first year of law school how to write very succinctly. Use those skills as you are working on this. In addition to the personal statement, that GPA class rank, there are a couple of other things that will come into play. They don't require a ton of work from you. They aren't vastly different. We're going to run through them very quickly. They don't need a lot of talking through. If you have questions, let me know. I'm happy to talk more about it, but it should be fairly self-explanatory. So the first one sometimes shows up. In addition to that class rank and transcript, you'll need a letter of good standing. All that says is that you don't have any outstanding payments and that you are not on academic probation or below whatever the minimum required GPA is at your school. Your registrar, your academic dean, somebody in the leadership of your school can make that happen. They need next to nothing from you. They can pull all of that information without your help. They just need to know you need it. Your resume. At this point, there should be some changes. Just update it like a normal person would. Add in the things that you've done. Try to keep it on a front and back. If you went through on-campus interviews or you worked with your career services office at the law school that you are transferring from, you can absolutely use the resume that you built with them if you like it. If that's part of the reason that you're transferring, maybe look elsewhere, but that is entirely up to you and your situation. If there were addenda included in your first year application and you think they may still be relevant, or the law school asks for them, you will provide those as well. That's pretty much it. And again, the vast majority of these things will be housed, or at least the instructions for what to do with them, will be housed in that LSAC application portal that you have already played with. You know what to do with it. You know when it's going to be annoying. You know where to go to look for things. You know how to add your letters of recommendation to your application. You know how to do all of that. Just make sure you're reading those directions very, very, very closely so you know which pieces need to go directly from your law school to the new one. Cool? Perfect. No questions up to now? Love it. So that's the how. And that's the easy part. The harder decision to make is whether or not you should transfer. And I said that there are some things that you have to contend with, and we will get to those. And that is why this is a more difficult question to answer and is going to be much more personal to you. I can walk you through things you should consider. And the very, very first one that you need to sit down and think about is why it is you want to transfer. There are plenty of good reasons to do so. There are also lots of really silly reasons. I'm not going to say bad reasons. If it's important to you, it's important to you. This is your life and your future. There are some that are better than others when it comes time to determine whether or not you actually want to transfer law schools. Okay? So if you are miserable, every day is terrible, you hate your classes, you hate, I just broke my earring. Isn't that great? While I fix this, you hate your classes, you hate the city that you live in, you are unhappy, everything is miserable, you don't have any support, whatever it is. If you are miserable in the law school that you are in, even if it may have nothing to do with the actual law school, you may hate the city, you may have some other stuff going on, whatever it is, if you are straight up miserable, and it's not something that is ephemeral, if this is a problem that you have been having and it is sustained, you cannot shake it, you're doing the things you need to do to try and get yourself out of it and it's not working, and it is very clear that you being in this place in this school is not helping, okay, totally fine. If you had a bad class and you didn't do well and you didn't like the professor, if that's the only thing, not always a great idea. If your support system is somewhere else and you are finding that you want to be closer to them so they can be more readily accessible to you to support you, that's a great reason to do so as well. If you are looking to transfer to a better school, asterisk, better does not always mean higher ranked. Okay? I chose better as the word that I was going to use here for a couple of reasons, because there are many different ways to define what better means to you. It is not just ranking. You want to look at employment outcomes. If you are moving to a school that has better employment outcomes for the particular area of law that you are interested in pursuing after you graduate, makes sense. May not be a higher ranked school. I don't know. If there is a specialty program or something that they do better than your school, also better. Ranking has nothing to do with that. If on the rare occasion the rankings will help you with this and you're looking to, go clerk for the Supreme Court or something along those lines, and you're looking to go join a firm that has flat out said, we only hire from these schools. One, I'm very interested in how you got them to tell you that, because most law firms wouldn't, and most law firms aren't that close-minded. But if that is whatever your better is, there are some objective things, there are some personal things, whatever your better is, if you are trying to transfer to a better school, cool. If you moved away from whatever your home place is, whatever area it is that you have your network already built, and you moved away from that to go to law school, just like with your support system, if you find that you want to move back, you want to plug back into that network that you started with, that's okay. Great reason. If you want to work in a particular part of the country and your school is not setting you up to do that effectively and very well, transfer makes sense. I'm going to use Louisiana as an example. If you want to practice in Louisiana, you best believe you should go to a Louisiana law school. They test some different things on the bar exam than the rest of the states because they have a slightly different thing going on down there. If you were trying to go, I use Maryland all the time, if you're trying to go to the University of Maryland and move to practice in Louisiana, you're going to have your work cut out for you. Not impossible, but it will likely be a little more difficult than if you go to one of the law schools in Louisiana. Keep all those things in mind, and if that's you, transferring may be a good option. And I touched on it really, really briefly. If there's a particular specialty area, if there's a particular program, you want a specialty dual degree, you want a particularly niche clinical experience or externship or something along those lines, and that school that you are looking to transfer to is the only place in the nation where you are going to get that opportunity, they are going to set you up in the absolute best possible place to get that opportunity, cool, do it. Consider transfer. There's a variety of reasons, basically, for you to transfer. If you're mad about a class, you're unhappy with a grade, or something along those lines, sit with that one for a little longer before you decide that transferring is the option. Because one class is only one class. 3 or 4 credits out of nearly 100 or a little more than 100 credits. Don't let that ruin your whole experience if that is the only thing that's like smudging up the window, okay? The next thing that I want you to think about is whether or not you can afford to transfer. I say this all the time. It is not new. Law school is expensive. Law school takes a long time and it costs a lot of money. Most merit-based scholarship opportunities are going to be as big as they're gonna get as a first-year student. If you have a good scholarship at the school that you currently attend, it does not come with you. I realize that's common sense for some people, but I have had to have that conversation in my career, so we're putting it out there now. Your scholarship does not come with you when you move schools. You are giving whatever that is up. Depending on what the location of your new school is, you may be making a cost of living adjustment that is more expensive. Make sure you are thinking about these things. Some schools will offer transfer student scholarships, but they are very, very, very rarely as generous as first-year opportunities are. I don't know why. That is how it works. If you as a transfer student are even eligible at all for scholarship dollars. You'll still do the FAFSA, all of the rest of those things, federally backed loans, that kind of fun stuff, that still comes with you. You can still do all of that. You'll do a recalculation to adjust to wherever it is that you're living. If you're using Grad Plus loans, all of that stuff is going to stay the same. You will go through the process again. You just will not have the benefit of the money you don't have to pay back. If there is a specialty program or a fellowship opportunity that is open to continuing law students, you may be eligible to apply for something like that, but you want to check that as you are making that the financial piece of this decision, as you are considering all of that information. If you cannot afford to transfer, if you cannot afford to lose the scholarship that you happen to have at this school that may not be the best fit for you, that is going to be a really hard decision to make, but you do need to think about it. This is not something that you go into and you're just like, it's fine, it's going to happen. Whatever needs to happen, well, I'll figure it out. Don't be that person. You are smarter than that. You are going to law school. You should have better sense. Do not just assume the financial pieces are going to fall into place. Take a hard look at them. Even if it's not a fun thing to do, make sure you are thinking about what transferring schools is going to do to your financial health. If it doesn't matter, awesome. You still need to look at it and decide if it doesn't matter. The next thing that you need to consider, and it's probably the most important, it's the whole reason we're doing this thing anyway, is whether or not you will be accepted. Being accepted as a transfer student is typically more difficult than being accepted as a first-year student. The acceptance rate percentages may look different, but it's also generally a significantly smaller pool of applicants. There are schools out there that typically see 3 transfer applications. There are bigger schools that see like 40, 50, 100. But when you think about it and you compare that to the number of first-year applications those schools are receiving each year, the percentages are not going to be super helpful. They're not going to be super indicative of what it actually means. Because all of a sudden, a school that has a 3 or 4% acceptance rate in first-year students that just happens to get a very well-qualified but very small pool of transfer applicants can suddenly have a 60% acceptance rate. Those are sending two very different messages. So make sure that you're looking at what those numbers look like when you are looking at how selective a school may be for their transfers. Like I said, nearly every school that I am aware of, every school that I have ever worked at, probably every law school period, are more selective when it comes time to accepting transfer students. What that means for you as an applicant is that you better be a rock star of a first-year student. This is also why we ask for class rank in that application. You best be sitting at the very top of that list. You want your grade point average to be awesome. At minimum, for average law schools, averagely statisticked law schools, things that are sitting close to the national average on GPA and LSAT, at minimum, and even then it's not a guarantee, but minimum, you should have above a 3.0 in your first year law school grades. Minimum. And that is no guarantee that you're going to be accepted even at a school that sits right on those national averages for LSAT and GPA medians. You need to do very well. Your class rank is going to have to be very high. And your professors are going to have to say really wonderful things about you. You have got to put together a stellar application package in order for your acceptance to be pretty solidly picked out. It is not unheard of. Many students will start at a mid-tier school and move up to a higher, a more prestigious, more selective. That happens. I'm not saying it is impossible. But the students that transfer like that typically are in the top 5 or 10 students of their class. They're in the top 5%. They are way up there. If you are not that person, maybe think very hard about whether or not you do in fact want to transfer, whether it is worth the time and the effort that you will put in to put that application together on the off chance that you may not be admitted. Or make some list adjustments. Be realistic when you are talking about this with yourself or with your partner or with whoever it is that you talk through big decisions like this with. You can also reach out to the law schools themselves. Ask how they approach transfer applications. Do they have a large class? Are they super selective? They may not be able to give you a floor. Well, if you aren't at least in the top 10% of your class, we don't even consider it. If you can get them to say that, awesome, so helpful. Most places probably won't. But they can give you helpful information as you are trying to figure out which schools are realistic, whether or not it is a good option generally. All of those things will come into play as you are trying to make this decision. So I've touched a little bit at a couple of points up to now on the consequences or the things that you have to contend with after you have chosen to transfer. You have committed to this process, you have applied to a school, and you have been accepted as a transfer student. Congratulations. That's awesome. Hopefully we are well on our way to putting you in a better situation, one that fits you better, one that is going to be more positive outcomed, I guess. That's not a word. But we're setting you up for more positive outcomes. You are going to be in a better place than you were prior to. That is absolutely possible. Many transfer students are super successful at the schools that they transferred to. I can think of several that I worked with over the course of my career that did really, really well and were so much happier after they transferred, for whatever reason that it was that it brought them to my school. But there are some things that happen to transfer students pretty universally that you need to understand before you commit to this thing. Law school is 3 years. We spend a lot of time talking about how it's long and it's difficult and it's expensive. On the flip side, 3 years is not a lot of time. It goes by very quickly. you don't have a ton of class. I mean, you take a lot of classes, but it's still only 3 years that go on your transcript, that go into that GPA, that determines whether or not you get honors at graduation and all of that good stuff. If you have a stellar GPA, which you should if you are planning on transferring, I need you to wave goodbye after you come to your new school. Most law schools, if not all of them, are going to wipe out the numeric value of your GPA. You will be starting from scratch as a 2L. So now you only have 2 years of grades. You'll still have access to your transcript from your first school. It's not like they go away. It's not like the work that you did didn't matter. But for the purposes of the law school from which you will graduate, your first year GPA does not exist. They'll keep your credits, but you do not, that numeric value just goes away. You are starting from 0. And that can mean a lot of things. Not the least of which is that you have 4 semesters instead of 6 to do really well. The other thing that you are starting over with is your network. Unless you were the most insular, disengaged first-year student, you cannot help but develop at least a little bit of a network in your first year of law school. It's designed that way because networking becomes a huge part of your career later on. You need to be able to talk to people. A lot of the time, that network is what will help you find job opportunities, get jobs. All of that stuff is going to come back into play as you move through your legal career. As a transfer student, you are waving goodbye to the network that you started with to create a brand new one. With one big asterisk and exception. I talked about moving back to a place where you have an established network. If that is what you have done, you can ignore this piece. You will need to build up your network within the law school community, but if you have a connection that's already in place to the community at large, extra points to the legal community in the place where your new law school is located, cool. For those of you that do not have this in place already, you are starting over. Your slate is clean, for better or worse. This is okay. Again, plenty of transfer students are super successful. This is not like a death sentence for your legal career. You can make it work. You just may have to be doing a little bit of extra work on that front end because you are coming in a year behind the students that you are joining in class when it comes to that networking. They have spent their first year, most of them, already meeting the people that are important players in the area that you are in, geographic area that you are in. You're just going to have to step it up. And you can probably be super successful, but you need to understand that you have to do that work. That is a thing that you will have to contend with as a transfer student. Many law schools build things in to make sure that you are getting extra opportunity to build up those relationships. They try to help you. They're not trying to make it more difficult or worse or harder. That's not the goal, but it is a product of transfer. The next thing that may happen is, again, I said most first-year curriculums are very similar, and that's true. Nearly every law school teaches basically the same classes in the first year of law school, but they don't always teach them in the same way. For example, the one that I saw most frequently when I was working in law schools and when I was in law school is contracts. In my law school, contracts is a 1-semester course that's 3 or 4 credits. At one of the schools that I worked at, contracts was a 2-semester course. Each semester was 3 credits. If I'm transferring from a school where it is only 1 semester into a school where it is 2, I need to take that 2nd semester of contracts because I have not learned whatever that is yet. It may have been an upper level class. They may have been teaching the same stuff and calling it something different at my school initially, and that's fine. There's nothing that says you must cover these specific things in a first year contracts class. That's left up to the folks that create the curriculum for the school that you're at. It's just that most of us teach the same thing-ish. Sometimes property is 2 semesters. Some schools, again, mine, where I went to law school when I was in law school, offered professional responsibility as part of the first year curriculum. Many schools do not. Instead, that is where that second semester of contracts or a second semester of property or something entirely different lived in the course of the first year. You need to take whatever those classes are to make up for the fact that you did not take them as a first year student at the school you now attend. Typically, the way that this works out, as soon as you are accepted, your transcript and occasionally syllabi from your first year classes will be handed over, to the folks that are in charge of academics at your new school. They will review everything and see where you have missed something that is important in their curriculum. And they will make it so you will take those classes and you will get the benefit of those classes wherever it makes the most sense to put them. So as a second semester 2L, you may be in class with 1Ls. Nothing bad about that. It's just a thing, again, that you need to be aware of, something that you will have to contend with as a transfer student. So in the grand scheme of law school credits and the flexibility that is offered as an upper level law student, so a 2L or a 3L, you may lose a little bit of those credits to spend flexibly to take classes in the area of interest for you, to take advantage of an experiential learning thing or a study abroad or an externship, whatever it is. You may not have quite as much flexibility as a student that started at that school as a 1L because you are having to catch up with part of the first year curriculum. That's why they sometimes look at the syllabus. If you happen to go to a school where instead of 3 credits, contracts is 1 semester, but it's 6 credits, I haven't come across that, but maybe it happens. You may not need to take that second semester of contracts that your new school offers because you've covered everything. They take the time to look that over before they say you must be in a first year class as a 2L. If there is a difference in the writing curriculum, this is another place where it crops up. Legal research and writing is incredibly important as you begin your legal career, as you move through your legal education. Schools take a lot of time to develop the curriculum they use to teach it to you as a first year, and it is almost always taught quite intensely in your first year. You can't do a whole lot as a summer associate if you don't know how to write. If your legal research and writing curriculum differs greatly from your first school to the second one, there may be legal research and writing courses you need to pick up in order to be set on the same playing field as your fellow classmates. So again, you may find yourself in class with 1Ls. Not a bad thing. Cannot stress this enough. It is just something you need to be aware of. So I didn't like using consequences as a word for it, because they really aren't consequences, but they are a thing that happens because you get it. The last thing that is probably most important for students considering transfer, and the thing that you're going to have to contend with if you do choose to transfer and are accepted, is how it will affect your eligibility to be on law review, to be on a competition trial team, a competition appellate team, any of those things, those co-curricular activities. So law review, you typically get some course credits. Competition teams, you typically get some course credits as long as you do all the things. Because there is a selection process for those types of things. For law review, it's often right on. It typically happens right at the end of your first year. So the end of your second semester. Those may not always be available to transfer students. So you may have to wait an entire year. And if you're like dead set on being part of the journal, you want to be on law review, you want to be an editor, you're hoping for editor-in-chief, you want that on your resume, you are super hyped to do it, you need to be sure that you are checking to see whether or not you as a transfer student are eligible. Because particularly if your plans happen to include like editor-in-chief or something, that typically doesn't happen to somebody who's only been on journal for a year. You can absolutely, if you can't get in at the start of your 2L year, you may be able to join before your 3L year. But you will not have the longevity that someone does that has the chance to be a part of Write-On, who gets invited to journal after their first year. It's the same way with competition teams. At the schools that I worked at, part of the spring semester for first years was in-house competition. That was how it was decided who was invited to join our competition teams for their second and third years. With Write-On for the law review, you may be able to get yourself in because it takes place over the summer. If trial competition, appellate competition, if those things are happening during that spring semester, there is very rarely a way that they can figure out how to slot you into that so you have the same chance to compete, to join. You can join as 3L. Again, this is not necessarily a bad thing. It is just a thing that you need to keep in mind as you make these choices. These are the reasons why transferring law schools is such a big decision. This is the reason why, if you happen to be talking to me at any point, planning your law school process, your law school and your legal education process with the understanding that you will be transferring, so like phoning it in a little bit as a first year student or a first year applicant, going to whatever school takes you with the understanding that regardless, I don't really care where I go for my first year. I know I'm transferring to this school, to my dream school, after my first year. If that is your plan, I really, 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 really urge you to reconsider. Don't sell yourself short first. You may be able to be admitted to the school that you are planning to transfer to as a first year applicant. Do not sell yourself short just to settle in. I'm going to go to whatever law school that is the cheapest and then I'll go from there. If there is a school that you are really excited to attend, put in the work to make sure that you are an attractive first year applicant too. If the worst happens, you do still have a plan, but do not, please, do not build your legal strategy, your legal education strategy with a transfer included. This is a thing that should happen after you have tried your best. You have chosen a law school as a first year that you think will be a good fit for you. Because fit is huge. It's very hard to decide. It is nearly impossible to quantify. But feeling good about the law school where you are, feeling supported, being challenged academically, having a good community that is useful, that is helpful, that is supportive, that is invigorating for you is huge. As an academic venture, law school is difficult. It gets all the more difficult if you are unhappy where you are. So do not make yourself miserable if there is a way to fix that, and that is often transfer. But do not just assume that transfer is going to be a part of your journey. Please. Take the decision on the front end as a first year student seriously enough to find a place where you would be happy all 3 years. And then if it does come to fruition that you need to transfer, you know how to do that. You know what to expect. We've covered a lot today. So at the end of it, transfer process as a whole, fairly simple. Decision on whether or not to transfer, more difficult, more nuanced. Will you be admitted? Can you afford to change schools? Can you give up those scholarships? Do you have a good reason to transfer, or are you just doing it for name recognition? Think through those things very, very critically as you make this decision in your first year. Transferring causes difficulties, I guess. Surmountable difficulties. But you are not making your life any easier on the whole, particularly with regard to your legal education, your legal networking, all of that, if you do choose to transfer. It can be a really great option for some students, but not for all. If you are finding yourself in this situation and you do want some help, we do offer help for transfer students. And as I'm sure you all know at this point, we have recently switched over into our nonprofit, and we are now a brand under Barrier Breakers, and we are thrilled to be able to offer sliding scale prices. So if this is something that you need an assist with, but you are worried about the cost, please reach out and talk to us. We can help. We want to help. If you're interested in seeing what our transfer packages look like, montgomeryconsulting.com/transfer. Pretty simple. If this has been helpful, great. I love it. I'm so happy. That is why I do this. Really, that's why I do the whole job. If you have questions, I'm going to leave it before I shut the feed down. It can be related to transfer. doesn't have to be. If you stuck around this long and you didn't have questions for transfer, kudos. I appreciate you hanging with me. And then after that, hopefully I'll see you again soon. So yeah, any questions, pop them up into the comments right now. We'll hang out for just a little bit, and then we'll sign off. And I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Check and see. Don't see any. I'll leave it up for just a couple more seconds. Realize that I tend to shut that down very quickly, and I don't want you guys to miss out on the chance to ask questions while I'm here. I think we're good. If you guys do think of questions, feel free to pop them up in the comments when this goes up after it has become a video that lives on all of our socials and our pages and all of that good stuff. We'll try to get back to you with an answer as soon as we can.